Yep, good evening. So last session we learned about class. So we discussed about class and class members in JavaScript. What we learned about? I told you about properties, properties and accessors. Property and accessors. And one more is method. As I told you, all properties, example, accessor example I given. So accessor we learned 2 points. One is we can use for controlling the behavior of property. Another one to access any member directly. Methods same like function. Only the difference is methods are immutable. Functions are immutable, methods are mutable. Next, one more important is constructor. In the class members, we need to discuss about constructor. Actually, what is constructor and how this constructor works? In object-oriented programming, actually the meaning of word constructor is a software design pattern. Constructor is a software design pattern. It is name of a design pattern. Actually, I told you once a simple overview that in software development, we follow various patterns. I told you iterator is a pattern. So in software development, we follow various patterns for designing application. The patterns are actually, we call them as design patterns. Actually, design patterns are 23. We call them GOF, Gang of 4 design patterns. These 23 design patterns are categorized into 3. We have creational patterns, structural patterns, and behavioral patterns. Behavioral patterns. In software development, in real world projects, we develop everything by using these patterns only. Even you have lot of experience in software development, you will not have complete experience on all 23 patterns. So because all are not used in one place, different projects, different requirements. So at very high level extreme experts experience, they know the complete design patterns and their purpose. Software development uses these patterns. Creational patterns are related to object creation mechanism. Structural patterns are related to designing of classes. Behavioral patterns are related to how the object communicates with its class. We call communication pattern. It's a big concept. So at your level, currently, you don't need to know about that design patterns. Later, once you get a lot of experience, then you can understand about that. Actually, so design patterns, let me give, this is design patterns actually 23. We call, these are creational patterns. These are abstract, factory, builder, factory method, prototype, singleton. These are called creational patterns. We have structural patterns. These are structural patterns. Adapter, bridge, composite, decorator, facet, flyweight, proxy. We have behavioral patterns. We call communication patterns. Chain of responsibility, command, interpreter, iterator. mediator, memento, observer, state, strategy, template method. All these comes under behavioral patterns. Software development is all about this. A software application is built means in the behind all these patterns are present. Without these we don't develop. Every software application is built using these patterns. Why? Because if you don't follow these patterns and build an application, then lot of bugs will come. Why we follow these patterns? Because they are already tested and proven. That means, for example, means one general example I will tell you. General example is suppose a small concept. Actually, suppose we have a game like chess. We have a game like chess, and you don't know how to play chess. Then you purchased a book. In that book, you have that book written by some grandmaster, and he written how to play chess from basics, everything. So you learn chess from this book, and you know everything about chess. You are perfect. You can play chess. You know the rules, everything. You learned from this book. Now, with this knowledge, can you play with experienced chess players in any tournament? Why not? You learn chess now. You learn chess. Then why can't you play with experienced people in the tournaments and all? Why can't you do that? Because the problem here is what experienced people's specialty is. They know some tricks. Those tricks are not in books. Those tricks they know by playing lot of games. They know the tricks. They can estimate what he is playing. In books, you will not get that knowledge. That means, for example, suppose I will take an example like some tic-tac-toe game, right? Suppose a tic-tac-toe game is there. In this tic-tac-toe game, suppose I am playing with any person. Suppose I given like this. So suppose some, yeah, I made my move here, and my opponent made his move here. Now I will guarantee that I will win the game. Compulsory. There is no chance that my opponent can win, because now I have a certain strategy now. Like my next move will be here. Then his move must be here. My next move will be here. Game done. I have a strategy. I have a plan, and I follow this strategy and plan. Now I can close the game here or here. This is what we need in software development. Blindly, whatever you learned, you don't write as a program and compile and run in project. Software development is not blindly writing the code that you have learned. It is all about various strategies. Because for this situation, how this works, if you write some wrong logic, then compiling is success, but result is wrong, output is wrong, functionality is wrong. These type of issues are very common in software. So in software development, we don't do anything new. We just follow some design patterns. Why? Because they are already tested and proven. For example, you are learning some language, JavaScript. You written a program, some errors are coming. You go Google and post that problem. In so many forums, they will provide a solution for that. Am I right? online, in so many locations, you will see several people have a solution written for that problem. How they know that you will come with this problem? How they already know that you will come with this problem? They have already solutions written for you. It is not like live somebody is chatting with you and giving solution. Whatever problem you posted, for that solution is already written. How they know that you will come with this problem? Because they know that majority people will follow one strategy and that will fail. Now when you see the answers, in answers you will not find that anybody tells you that uh, remove this and add this. He will simply say that for achieving this you follow this. He will not try to correct your code. He will simply put a standard procedure saying that write like this, then you will achieve. He will not try to correct your code. Nobody will try to correct your code. They will simply say that if you are trying this, then for this you have to follow this process. First this, second this, third this. That means there is a strategy, there is a plan, and if you miss any one of that, it will not work. And they will ask you, verify whether you are following the same or not. These are all software design patterns actually. So in software development at very extreme experience level, you will find people with knowledge of these design patterns. That means at project lead, software architect level, you will find these kind of knowledge, design patterns. In learning, you can learn few patterns according to situation. So constructor is a software design pattern. What this pattern deals with? Actually, out of 23 patterns, it belongs to which category? It is a creational pattern. That means it belongs to which category? Creational. And what is the constructor means? That means it is the process. It is the process of creating an instance for class. That means constructor is a design pattern used for class to create an object for class. So what is the purpose of constructor? Two answers. Without experience, people answer is constructor is used for initializing values. If you hear this initializing values, that means he is not OOP expert, he is OOP learner. Then we will ask him question in interview. If it is for initializing values, then it should be called as initializer. Why you are calling as constructor? Yeah? That means if your definition for constructor is initializing values, then it should be called as initializer. Why you are calling as constructor and you are using initializing values? So constructor is not initializing values. It is for creating instance. If anybody asked in OOP languages what is purpose of constructor, you should say that constructor is a special type of subroutine, is a special type of subroutine used for instantiation. Instantiation means it is used for creating object. That means constructor is a special type of subroutine, means it is a special type of method. It is a special type of method which is used for creating objects. If constructor is not there, object cannot be created. If constructor is restricted, then object cannot be created. That is the reason in OOP languages, wherever constructor is not possible, there object cannot be created. For example, here we don't have, but in general OOP languages you have interface. Interface don't have a constructor, so you cannot create an object for interface. So constructor is responsible for creating objects. Object is created by using constructor, right? And it is a instantiation, means creating of object. And very important, every class have a default constructor. Every class have a default constructor. That means even you don't write, every class will have a constructor inside it. So for example, you see here, so I will open the project. So here I am defining, let's see, suppose I am creating a class. So class product, and inside this it is empty. And I am creating let obj is equal to new product. Now it is able to create an object for that class. As I told you, constructor is responsible for creating object, but I don't have constructor. Then how it created object? That means you don't have constructor manually created, but internally it have a constructor. You see, this product is having a constructor. It is having a constructor. That means even you don't write a constructor, by default a constructor will be there that is responsible for creating objects, right? So constructor is every class have default constructor. Now the question is, if every class have a constructor, then why to create a constructor? That means you can add a constructor explicitly, means externally you can add a constructor. If already constructor is there, what is the purpose of adding constructor? What is the intention of adding a constructor? The intention of adding a constructor is to define any functionality at the time of construction of object. That means while creating object, do you want any functionality to perform? Means constructor is responsible for creating object. But at the time of creating object, do you want any extra work? If you want any extra work, give it to constructor. That means constructor is used to define actions to perform, because remember, constructor is a method. If constructor is a method, means it contains actions. What are those actions and when those actions are performed? So actually constructor is a special type of method. That's what I call subroutine. It is a special type of method that executes automatically at the time of creating object. At the time of creating object, this method will execute automatically. For example, see here, suppose let's design one screen. So here I am using a screen. So in the body, just we'll put a head. Okay, yeah. And here we have the body section. And in this, what we will do is we will create a button called insert. And we will create a button called delete. Now here, what we want to perform is, whenever user clicks insert or delete, Now I need to perform those operations. Insert, delete. Insert will insert, delete will delete. But actually we cannot insert without connecting. So before insert or before delete, every time we have to first connect. So that means connection is a process that should happen every time before inserting or before deleting. In that case, if a work has to be done automatically before you start anything, then you can give that work to constructor. If you want any work to get ready before you start working, whenever object is ready, you want some work ready, then you can give that work to constructor. So here, see what I am doing. I am creating a script. In that, I am creating a class called database. This database class is having insert method. This insert method will print document.query selector. It will collect the paragraph inner HTML. It will say record inserted. And we have another method called delete, and document.query selector, and the paragraph inner HTML, we should say record deleted. But before inserting or deleting, I want connection. Now, if I give that connection to another method, then every time you have to call the method. But I want this to perform automatically. In that case, what we will do is we will give that work to a constructor. In JavaScript, actually, JavaScript constructor is anonymous type. JavaScript constructor is anonymous type. In other programming languages, constructor is not anonymous. It will have a name. Class name is given to constructor. But in JavaScript, constructor is not having a name. It is anonymous. That means we have class and class name, and here inside it constructor, and it is a method. Anonymous means we know. Constructor is defined by using the keyword constructor, and it doesn't have name. If it is generally in other programming languages, it will have class name. But here it is empty, no name. So here you can see I am creating a constructor. And in this constructor, I will keep an alert saying that connected with database. Connected with database successfully. This message we are displaying. Now, here generally what we do, we write the logic for connection with the database. So the work that you want to perform automatically before insert or before delete, you can give that work to constructor. Now see what happens. I will create a function called insert click. On insert click, what we will do, we will create an object for database class, new database. We will create an object for database. And through that object, we can access insert method. Understand? Similarly, we have another function. So the function is delete click. On delete click, we will create another object, and through that object, so database, we will say obj.delete. We will call delete method. That means on click of insert button, on click, we will call insert click. Here on click, we will call delete click. That's what we are doing. Now you can see here, when I click on the insert button, remember, anywhere I am not calling constructor, means manually, we don't have any connection. Just what we are doing, we are creating object and we are calling a method delete. We are creating an object and we are using insert. But actually in that class, there is a constructor. I am not mentioning about constructor anywhere, but by default, you can observe, see, when I click insert, first it will say connected with database. That means constructor is executed automatically. So constructor contains actions which are automatically performed every time when you create an object. So now, okay, then record inserted. I click on delete, again connected successfully. Then delete. That means every time the constructor is automatically doing its work. If I don't give this work to constructor, if I give it to an ordinary method, then I have to call it manual. But I want it to get ready and keep the environment ready so that I can start working. So what is advantage? We have advantage, drawback. What is advantage is we can immediately start working with connection. What is drawback is if you are not working with connection, the connection is ready. Why you made connection ready if you are not working with it? That is drawback. That is the reason every time we don't use a constructor, explicit constructor. That means why you are connecting if you are not doing insert or delete. So we use constructor only in a situation where we want the actions to perform automatically. So, and that is compulsory. We have to mandatorily do that. In that case, we give the work to constructor. So here, I am not initializing any value. So constructor is not for initializing values. So constructor actual purpose is creating objects. While creating objects, if you want your constructor to do some any additional tasks while creating object, then you have to define this, right? Explicit constructor. And one more very important, you should know that here, when I am creating an object for this class, right? Here, I am not mentioning, but internally, the name, this name is calling a constructor internally. Is calling a constructor internally because constructor is anonymous. Na? This is class name. And after the class name, how to call its anonymous method? Anonymous methods are called with an empty parenthesis. I am not using that here. I am not using that here because this anonymous method can execute automatically. It can execute automatically. If it can execute automatically, then I don't need to mention about it. But in other technologies, you learn that after the class name, you mention the parenthesis. You are mentioning the parenthesis that means now anybody may ask you, it is a class, why you are writing like function? Generally, parenthesis is used for function. Why you are writing a class as a function? That means I am not writing class as a function. I return class in that class I am calling a constructor. Now the question is, why you are calling constructor?
Recording in
At the
progress.
time of instantiation. At the time of instantiation. At the time of instantiation. That means if constructor is parameterized, then you have to mention about constructor at the time of instantiation, at the time of creating of object. That means, for example, as of now, there is no problem. But constructor can be parameterized. That means we will say DB name. That means database name. Now, what I will do is here I will use a binding expression and I will say connected with the DB name. DB name. I'm just giving the DB name here. Now, generally here, I say insert on Oracle, delete from MySQL, like this I'm giving. Now, what happens here is when you create an object, you see when you create an object for this database, now this database class is having a constructor with parameter. Now, is parameter optional or mandatory in JavaScript? Every parameter is mandatory. If every parameter is mandatory, then how we pass? That means now we have to open the parenthesis. We have to open the parenthesis. You don't need this until or unless you don't need parameters in a constructor. But in other technologies, you need this even if constructor is parameterless. But in JavaScript, you need this only when constructor is parameterized. Now we need to pass the parameter. This is what Oracle, because it is expecting database name. And similarly here, if I don't pass, it will return undefined, right? So, and here I will keep as MySQL like this. Now here you can see this is now when I click on insert, then it will say connected with Oracle database and inserted. When I say delete, connected with MySQL database, then deleted. That means you can have a constructor which can be parameterized or parameterless. In many interviews, they ask this question also very regularly for freshers. If constructor is parameterized, when the parameters are passed. If constructor is parameterized, when the parameters are passed. So, inexperience answer is at the time of creating object. You will see that answer regularly from the people who don't know proper OOPS. They will give you an answer that at the time of creating object, we have to pass the values. That is wrong. It is not at the time of creating object. At the time of allocating memory. New, what is new? memory allocating operator. At the time of allocating memory for object, at that time we have to pass the parameters, not at the time of creating object. Right? We don't call this as creating object. We call this as allocating memory for object. So object is created. We are allocating memory for that object. While allocating memory, constructor is loading. At the time, we have to pass the parameter. So it is not at the time of creating object, it is at the time of allocating memory for object. So that is the nature of constructor actually. This is one point. Means constructor is parameterized. You have to mention about constructor at the time of instantiation. And you have to pass values into constructor at the time of allocating memory for object. That is the point. That means LED obj is equal to new. So name here into this, we have to pass the parameter. That is constructor with parameters. This is one simple example. This is one example of how do we define constructor. Here some more points you should know is JavaScript constructor cannot overload. Generally in other programming languages, constructors can overload. That means we can have multiple constructors explicitly written, but here you can have only one. So JavaScript constructor cannot overload. And obviously we already know that class will not have any static members. Class will not have any access modifiers here, like public, private, protected. So you cannot restrict constructor also. Actually, we can restrict constructor in other OOP languages. Like we can create a private constructor. If anybody asks, what is the purpose of private constructor? In general OOP languages, it is a very popular question. So private constructor means constructor is used for which purpose? Instantiation, creating of object. If you make a constructor private, then it cannot create object. If you are restricting constructor, that means you are restricting creating of object. So in OOP interviews, they can ask in two ways. Like what is the purpose of private constructor, or how we can prevent instantiation by using a private constructor we can do. In JavaScript, it is not possible. So we cannot restrict constructor. That is clear. So this JavaScript constructor is not like other programming languages, little change. But these are the basic rules you need to understand about constructor. So what is the purpose of constructor, how to write constructor, and how to pass parameters into constructor. That's it. We don't have any private constructors. We don't have any constructor overloadings and all these things. Okay. That is what actually point about constructor. So these are all the members of class. Constructor related some more rules are there. We will see now. Some more rules we will come across. That is about one concept called constructor, right? So that means now in the summary, class members. So we have one is property, another one is method and accessor, another constructor. So class can have only these four members. And we discussed what are those and how to use them, right? Next important, after understanding module and class, now we need to know about another concept, code reusability. Code reusability and extensibility. Extensibility. One of the main feature of OOP is code reusability and extensibility. How to reuse the code, how to extend the code. Actually, you can reuse code by using two techniques. One we call as aggregation, another we call as inheritance. So aggregation and inheritance. So technically you can reuse and extend code by using two techniques, aggregation and inheritance. What is aggregation? So aggregation is nothing but it is the process of accessing logic, accessing members of one class, accessing members of one class in another class without rewriting. So it is the process of accessing the members of one class in another class without rewriting them. Without rewriting, you can access and use them. How? So actually, it is the process of reusing without configuring any relation between classes. We don't create any relation between classes. All classes are independent. Without creating any relation between classes, we can access the members of one class in another. So it is often called as object to object communication. Object to object communication. That means it is also known as has a relation. In OOP languages, has a relation means creating relationship for classes in such a way that they are not related to each other, but they can access members of one class in another. That means they are not related to each other, but they can access the members of one class in another. That is what actually has a relation means. We call it as object to object communication, or it is called as aggregation, right? So how it is possible? So simple. For example, see here, I am creating a script and here I created a class. This is I given base. Okay, base class have a print method. I will put console.document.write base class print method. I am having a base class print method. I am creating another class called derived, and this is having a print method. Now document.write. So here derived class print method. Now the point is, I want to access this print method in this and use it. That means in derived class, I want to use the members of base class. If I want to use the members of base class in derived class, then we don't need to write this again. Just what we do is, here we will create an object for base class. We'll create an object for base class, and through that object we can access print. You don't need this constructor again, same, right? You can follow the general thing. Now you can create an object for base class in the derived class and you can access. This is called aggregation. Aggregation means Is derived class related to base class? No, there is no relation. But derived class is able to access the members of base class using an object. This mechanism is called aggregation. Now, what is advantage? You can access both print methods using one object only. That means what we have to do, we have to create an object for which class derived. If I create an object for derived class, and through derived class, if I access print, it can access both base class print as well as derived class. That means one object is enough to handle both class members. Now you can see it is going to access and use those two. That means the base class print method and derived class. But actually base class print method is present in a separate base class. So this is accessed inside the derived class by using which keyword? By using an object for that class. And through that object, we are able to access and use. So this is the mechanism called as aggregation. Aggregation means without having any relation between classes, we can access the members of one class in another class. Just what we have to do, we have to create an object, and through that object we can access. Now, without creating object, we have inheritance. Inheritance is nothing but it is the process that allows to access members of one class in another class without an object. How it is possible? You can configure relation between classes. How to configure relation between classes? To configure relation, that means I am not creating this object. Okay. Then if I create an object for derived class, then what happens? Derived class print method only will come. Then you can see only derived class print method is coming. But I want to access the base class print method also here. Previously, what we done? We created an object for that. Without object, we need. Then this derived class can extends base class. Derived class can extend base class. If you can extend in an existing class, then you can access its members here. That means, so you can access the members of existing class in current class by using extends. That means current class can extend the existing class. And very important is existing class is known as superclass. And current class is known as derived class. We call it as derived class. That means now here, this is actually called as superclass, and this is derived class. Now, very simple. You can access superclass members in derived class by using super keyword. So you don't need any object. That means now what I can do here, in this print method, I want to access base class print method, then simply super dot print. That's it. We don't need to create an object. Without creating an object, we can access the members of base class in derived class. For that, we have to just use super. Now, in order to use super keyword, there must be relation between the classes. If I am not extending, then relation is removed. Then super will not work. So we have to configure relation. Now you can see it is again working same. It is working same. So we can reuse with relation, without relation. Without relation is aggregation, and with relation, this is referred as, this process is referred as is a relation. It is referred as is a relation. Has a relation, is a relation. So technically, inheritance is the process of extending a class. So I will tell you extensibility also now, how it is extended, why we need extensibility also we'll see. Technically, this is inheritance. Example, this is an example. Now here, so many problems are there. When we are using inheritance, actually you have to remember one OOP rule actually. You need to remember one object-oriented programming rule. Actually, as per the OOP rules, so when you create an object for derived class, which is extending superclass, understood? When you create an object for derived class, which is extending the superclass, then what happens is, then as per OOP rules, first base class constructor is called, then followed by derived class constructor. This is basic OOP rule. This is the basic OOP rule. When you create an object for derived class, first base class constructor will be called, after that derived. That is order, compulsory. This is the basic rule actually. This is the rule. And this rule is followed by all OOP languages except JavaScript. Then again problem. So JavaScript will not follow the above rule. It will not follow the above rule. Then it's problem. Then what we have to do is, you have to explicitly design the derived class constructor. You have to explicitly design the derived class constructor that calls base class constructor. You have to explicitly design a derived class constructor that calls the base class constructor. This is not required in other OOP languages because it internally calls. Now see the problem. The problem is, base class is having a constructor. And I will give, so document.write, it is base class constructor. Okay, break. Now derived class is also having a constructor, and we are having document.write. So this is derived class constructor. Okay, break. We have base class constructor, derived class constructor. Now, as of now, it is not showing any problem. But see, When I run this, remember, if there is no relation, no problem. If there is relation, then this problem. If there is relation with superclass, first which constructor should call? Super. After that, which constructor? Derived. But currently, super constructor is not called. In that case, you can see when I run this, only derived constructor is coming. You go to the inspect and console. In the console, you will see the problem correctly mentioned here. Must call a super constructor in derived class. This is mandatory. This problem will not come in other OOP languages because it will call. But here it will not call. Then we have to explicitly call. How? Super constructor can be called in derived constructor just by using super keyword. That's it. That means now the super constructor is called here. And remember, if super constructor is parameterized, you pass parameters here. Currently, super constructor is not parameterized, it's so empty. So now you can see, now the problem is solved, everything working fine. First base class constructor, then derived class constructor, then base class print, then derived class print. So as per the OOP language rules, first base class constructor, then derived class constructor. This rule is internally followed by Java, .NET, C++ and all, but not TypeScript, JavaScript. You have to manually call them. So we have to manually call. That means this is again a rule about constructor. The derived class constructor must call superclass constructor if it is having relation. If no relation, forget about this. Only when relation is there, then superclass must be there. Another point, if constructor is there explicitly, if superclass not having a constructor and derived class not having a constructor, no need to call anyone. The previous example was doing that. We are not calling any constructor. We are not. Even if superclass is not having a constructor also explicitly, then no need to call it. You have to call superclass constructor only when it is defined with a explicit constructor. Right? If superclass constructor is not there, you see, superclass constructor is not there. I'm not calling. And here you can see it is working. But you see the reference is having the problem. What is the reference problem? Super constructor, you must call super constructor in derived class. Why? I'm not writing a constructor. Na? Even I am not writing a constructor. You know that it have a default constructor. Na? Then obviously the default constructor will be called with super. Right? It should be called with super. Right? That is very important. So how you define the constructors and configure them. Right? About constructors, some important rules you need to understand in this. And this is one point about extending inheritance. Now in this we have some more inheritance. But we'll see tomorrow. Right? In tomorrow's session, we will have to discuss about inheritance and polymorphism. More options are there. With that, we will finish OOP concept. JavaScript have only these things. So we will finish OOP. Then we will discuss about events and how we can work with the events. Then we will go into jQuery and backend now. Databases, working with our own APIs. We will start working with backend also simultaneously. That we will see after this OOPs and events. Okay. Tomorrow we'll continue. encapsulation. What he told. Then what he said about encapsulation? What about encapsulation? Encapsulation means what? This thing, nothing we know about encapsulation. That's why encapsulation is creating a class with members is encapsulation. Already we learned that.